What's poppin', mi gente? Guess who's back? Back with another video. Happy New Year to everybody. I hope you're all staying safe during the pandemic. I hope it hasn't adversely affected you all too much. If you're in the US, well, hopefully all of the recent antics that have been going on in our country, Jesus Christ, I can't even speak English today. Fuck me. Alright, that's it. Forget the engine. It's time to drag my stupid ass back to kindergarten and learn my AB3s. Fuck it. But seriously, hope everybody out there is doing well, staying safe. Crazy times haven't adversely affected you too much. If they have, remember, it's not a bad life, it's just a bad day. So I'm gonna go ahead and dive right in here. First, I want to apologize to you all in advance for the fact that I'm not gonna be able to show you anything in the Unity engine today. I have no idea what's causing this, but I discovered earlier in the week that whenever I go into it, my Bluetooth dongle cuts off and cuts off my new mouse. I just had to replace the mouse, so yeah. I'm not going to be able to show you guys any of this stuff I wanted to, so I'm going to have to use GIFs instead. I apologize in advance. I am going to get a wireless USB mouse in the next couple of days when I can find some free time from work to stop in the store and find one. Next up, did want to share some bad news. I had to let 2 people go from my team. These weren't paid individuals. These were people that were donating stuff to my team. I won't say what, but it was pivotal stuff, and I had to let them go because they just were not producing anything, and it had gotten ridiculous. In the future, I will not be taking any volunteer work at all. All positions are going to be paid only, and if a person won't accept pay and can't be reliable, I'm not going to put them on the team because it's just slowing me down too much. I'm becoming too much of a headache. And while I appreciate people wanting to donate things and contribute things, it has to be on my schedule, not theirs, because this project has seen too many delays and I just cannot allow them to continue going on. Third, I want to apologize for the lack of updates. I think we're going on a month and a week here that I had not updated. You know, I know people tend to panic if they don't get updates every 2 weeks or so. No, I'm not dead. No, the engine hasn't been dropped or anything crazy like that. I've just been ridiculously busy throughout the holidays with work and family, and now throughout January with work itself. So admittedly, much work hasn't gotten done on the project in the last 5 weeks or so. There isn't too much to share with you guys other than conceptual stuff. But the good news is I did manage to save up some extra money I can throw into the project spriting wise, because let's face it, getting $700 a month off of Patreon, it just isn't enough. It helps. I appreciate all you guys putting in anything you can. You know, again, I say this all the time, nobody owes me anything, but from a developer's perspective, it's just not a lot of money to work with. I got to do the best I can with what I've got, and a big chunk of the money I'm getting is coming out of my own pocket still, so it is what it is. This is the price you have to pay, both literally and in the metaphorical sense, to get a dream done, and I don't mind it in the least, but bottom line is it just slows things down. Now, I have used my time when I had free time at work to continue taking the courses I've been taking on Unity and C# in general. I'm up to my 2nd course now that's about to be done, and it is really going to help with the development speed of the project, so I'm thinking long term here. This is again something that's like, okay, let me do a little less work on the project to study some stuff, learn a bit more, so that down the line the development speed is exponentially much faster, which is definitely going to benefit this project in the long run. The other thing I've been doing, and this is going to give you guys a little insight into the developmental process with me, is when I have downtime at work, I actually have time to, I can't actually code. I can't really converse with my team because, you know, again, my job, they do monitor what you do on their systems, and it's not something I want to be doing in there. It's going to cause me an issue. But I can sit down and type out stuff and take notes on different aspects of the game I want to develop further, and one of those I've been heavily focused on as of late is the weapon system. And what I mean by this is, in the original game, almost all of the weapons were exactly the same. The only difference was there were some stat differences. If you look at the swords, there were literally about 40 to 45 of them that had the exact same animation. They might have been minor speed differences, but that's nothing to really write home about when the animation is exactly the same, and it's just altering the damage amounts by 1 or 2 points, or adding something lame like an element to it that doesn't really have any obvious effect except increasing or decreasing, in a lot of cases, the damage you're doing. And I wanted it to be that weapon sets in Castlevania's Symphony of the Night Hacked were not just going to be the same thing over and over and over. Yeah, there were a lot of weapons in the original game. Yeah, there were some unique ones like the Blue Knuckles, the Heaven Sword, the Valmonway, but you really didn't have that many options to choose from. You had knuckle weapons, you have knife weapons, which were just basically knuckle weapons with more range. You had swords, you had two-handed swords, which were basically slower, larger swords. No other differences really, other than again stat and damage differences, and it was just boring. There really wasn't a lot of weapon diversity compared to something like Dead Cells, for example. For those of you who haven't played this game, I highly recommend looking it up. The weapons there, each and every one, even the multiple swords, is unique in some way or form. And it's just ridiculous how many different ways you can play the game and how it feels different each and every time. Now, this isn't Dead Cells, this is a Castlevania game. So I didn't want to go crazy with it and have Alucard with like 40 different weapon sets, because that's just not a realistic expectation. So for now, I instead narrowed it down to about 10 of them. I have the animations for most of them because I originally had an artist who I was paying to do animations for Alucard and weapon animations, and I had him do a lot of them, a whole lot of them. I've shown off some of them, but believe me, there are quite a few you guys have never seen and won't see until the game's released because I don't want to spoil it. But there were a lot of them that I wasn't sure I was going to use. I made it a point to never tell the artist that, because when you tell an artist that, they tend to not put as much effort into it and think they can half-ass it, but you'd be surprised how often you later on down the line end up using those animations for something, so I want to make sure the quality level is consistent. So with that being said, I have a lot of weapon animations, a lot of animations for Alucard that can be put to use here and will allow me to diversify the weapons. I'll need to have more done, but not a big deal because those don't need to be done for a demo to come out. That's something that can be worked on as this progresses. All the weapons don't need to come out on release day one. They can be added little by little as the games develop further. The big thing with the weapons is, though, I didn't want them to feel like Dark Souls weapons. Dark Souls weapons, a lot of them feel very similar to one another. They really do. And they're not very exciting overall, with a lot of the moves just being variations of each other that can serve the same purpose. Salt and Sanctuary I felt had a similar issue. A lot of the weapon moves were pretty useless. They were just there, they just existed, and it was like, okay, 99% of the time you're going to stick to one or two moves because the rest in that weapon set are redundant. I didn't want that to be the case here, so the way I've been developing this is simple. You have basic attacks with your weapon: standing, jumping, crouching. Some weapon sets aren't even going to have a crouching attack. They'll have a standing one. Some will have aerial chains or aerial rays, whatever you want to call them, in that you can do multiple hits in the air on an enemy that's been launched up, and you'll hover while doing them. Others only have single attacks. Some weapons are being designed to be ground-based. If it's ground-based, that doesn't mean it's useless in the air. It means I'm giving you something that, let's say if you have a harpy that's annoying, you'll be able to knock it out of the air while it's on the ground stunned, beat the living shit out of it, and take it out. This is something I have to think of because I want the weapon sets to be fully functional in just about any circumstance, while having their specialties to differentiate them. To give you an example of what I mean, I'm going to show you some notes I created on Alucard's two-handed sword weapon sets in particular. Now, again, these are just notes. This stuff is liable to change at any time, but again, it's conceptual information that gives me a framework to start with and know where I want to go with this. And that the attacks are uninterruptible. The basics are Alucard takes reduced damage if hit during an attack, but the attack will continue. And there's also armored enemies in the game now. You know, axe armor, for example, corner guards, you know, sword lords, armor lords, plate lords, what have you. These all have different levels of armor that reduce damage, and there are some weapons that aren't going to work so good on those, and there are other weapons that are designed to just bust right through it and destroy it. Again, the weapons will be experimented with at balance, so you won't be using a regular sword and feel useless against armored enemies. And there's also the fact that I'm setting it up that you can have two loadouts at the moment that you can switch between just by using the analog stick. The same way you can use potions, you can use the analog stick to open up a little sub-menu and use your potions. I'm not planning on having an inventory menu that you can access during gameplay. Between stages, yes, if you want to change your armor, your capes, your accessories, you can do it there, but during the stages, no. You're not going to be able to change that because it disrupts gameplay. You will be able to change your weapon loadout, which is going to limit you to probably basically a weapon in each hand, unless you have a two-handed weapon, which two-handed weapons are being designed that the different hands or different attack buttons, I'll call it going forward, the different attack buttons do different things. And if you're reading these notes here, you're probably seeing that for yourself right now on the bottom set. You're seeing part of it. Hand 1 and Hand 2 do different things. I'll expand on that further. But for the two-handed swords to start out, I've started off with 3 different varieties of it. The first is what I call a basic one. And these are the swords planned for it, but again, this could change any time. So take this with a grain of salt. These are basically upgrades of each other. So at the moment, I haven't decided what each upgrade will do, but the basic idea is they all have the same moveset. It's just a Claymore's the basic one. A Flamberge might do more hit stun. Sword of Dawn might have more range, or in this case, there's an extra special tacked on. And there's also +1, +2, +3, etc. variants of weapons. Similar how do we have the Alucard sword +1 in Castlevania HD. And I think that's derived from Dark Souls, if I remember correctly. But the basic idea is each one of these upgrades will give you some minor boost. If I was to mention the short swords, right now the short swords moveset is designed to be short sword, or the short swords weapon sets or variants that improve are designed to be the short sword, Ice Brand, and then the Joy Use, which the Ice Brand, if you hit them enough times, they start to get slowed down from the ice, and the Joy Use is an even further upgrade that you can actually freeze the enemy in place encased in gold. I'm not planning a major effect there. I might color them gold and put some particles over them, but it's almost a form of petrification. But again, multiple hits required to do it, so it's not overpowered. But those are upgrades. On the other hand, though, if you want to stick with your short sword the whole game, you can keep upgrading that, and the overall DPS for the short sword at a short sword plus, well, let's say, I don't know if I'm going to go up to 9 or 5, but let's assume +9 for now. That short sword's going to have a higher DPS than the Joy Use would overall, but it doesn't have those added effects that would make gameplay a little easier, so it's kind of balancing out risk versus reward. Do you want to stick with a short sword that's going to do more damage, or a Joy Use that's going to do slightly less damage but give you those added effects? What do you prefer to do? Okay, and again, I'll tweak that, play with that. Let's get back to two-handed swords here. I only mentioned those because I'm not sure what the various upgrades are going to do here yet. I haven't decided for these yet. But the basic sword, two-handed swords, would be what you consider a retro type. And that's if you look at the attack chains. Standing attack's just a single two-handed swing, crouching's the same, air's the same. Nothing fancy, no air chains or nothing. The special move is a two-handed chop that has a long range to it. Again, I cannot go into Unity now, so I'm going to show you the short swords version of it on a GIF. And you can see here it's a two-handed overhand chop, but picture this more being like the one you'd see in Portrait of Ruin or Dawn of Sorrow. That has much more range, does much more damage, and is going to go right through their armor like a knife through warm butter. So it has additional effects. And as the special move goes, all you have to do is up an attack. Yes, I'm separating the buttons for using sub-weapons to something different. You no longer have to hit up an attack, you just hit a button and you fire your sub-weapon. And I'm planning on it at the moment that you have 1, possibly even 2 sub-weapons, I'm not sure yet. I have it enabled to be 1 at the moment. I'm thinking of expanding it to 2, but we'll talk about that more a little later in the video because, again, this is something that's going to require testing and is already being tested by myself extensively. But getting back to what we're talking about, this would be a move that takes MP so that you can't use it over and over. MP in the game is restored pretty fast. By attacking enemies, killing them, you get MP back automatically and over time, so it still limits you, so you can't just use that special move over and over, but you'll be able to use it enough that they'll be like, oh, okay, this is nice. But you see how basic this weapon is. It's a single strike with the basic attacks, the special move's a single strike, and that's it. This is like a legacy version of the two-handed swords from the original game. You know, if you just want to be basic, you don't want to have all these extra fluff and knocking up enemies and knocking them back and all this other shit, here you go. And the good side about this is these two-handed swords, although they're called two-handed, I'm probably going to rename this weapon set to Great Swords. It takes 1 weapon slot, so you can still have a shield in the other, or you could have a raised attack like Destruction Orbs, or a spear, a one-handed spear in the other hand, or, you know, a short sword type or a basic sword type, and you're good to go. You know, it doesn't take up 2 hands here because it's very basic. If we move on to the modern one, though, you'll notice the first thing it says is takes 2 hands to use. It has less DPS than the basic version, but more damage reduction if you hit during it. A downside of these is there's no crouching hitbox size attacks, so can't be used in tight spaces, unlike the basic variant, but there aren't going to be that many tight spaces where Alucard won't want to be in wolf mode anyway, so it's somewhat redundant there. But you can see if you look, it takes up 2 hands to use, but again, they have different moves. Like, you know, hand 1 is the standard 3-handed, 2-handed swings, which if you guys give me a second, I'll actually show you that animation. And again, I apologize this is broken up like this, but I can't get into Unity, so I'm gonna have to show you 2 animations. You can see the first 2 slashes there, pretty simple stuff. And then you can see the third here, and this one's designed to knock enemies back. This weapon set is, again, its range, keep enemies off you, and then reposition to continue your attack. But there's more to it than that. The ducking version is different. You have a slow launching attack. I don't have an animation to show you guys yet. I have to have it done, but the basic idea is he's swiping that sword with both hands upward, and it knocks the enemy up into the air. He has no aerial combos, so it's not really something that you're going to want to jump up with a regular sword. They have regular launchers, which I've shown you the animations before. I'll touch on that in another video, because I want to focus on these. But with those swords, you can basically launch the enemy up to an air chain, hover in the air doing it. Not with this weapon set. It's not designed for that. So that slow launching attack will pop them up in the air. But the plus side is it's also designed to work on larger enemies like Hammer Shaker or Red Smashers or Gurkha Masters that can actually be popped up slightly, and it will interrupt their attacks, keeping you safe. Air, you can see it's just the initial ground swing, that single attack that I showed you guys a moment ago. We'll go back to it. I know the video shows 2 attacks, so nope, this is the wrong animation, sorry. This single initial attack, there's a jumping version that he does in the air. I'll go ahead and show you guys that briefly. And you can see it right here. There it is, single attack, but that'll actually push aerial enemies away from you and can actually take them out of the air if you breach them, as I call it. Do enough damage to them to drop them to the ground so that you can then continue your onslaught. Now, I did mention the slow launching attack a moment ago, and you guys should know me well enough to know I would not do something like that without giving you a way to follow up. Because yeah, it's nice to interrupt moves, but what about those smaller what I call popcorn or ankle biter enemies, like, well, I shouldn't say ankle biter, like a zombie type or a skeleton. You know, what fun use is it to launch them up in the air and not be able to do anything except a single attack? Well, he still has the whirlwind special, which is a simple up and attack, and I've also set it up and programmed it so now it also can be used in the air. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, it's this animation right here. And this is based off of Grimoire of Souls. So you can launch them up and then interrupt the attack with this to do a bunch more damage and tear them to pieces. And the move has been set up so that it's actually will block projectiles and is immune to touch damage. So you can literally go right through enemies with it, whirling around, spinning, doing damage to them. You don't have to worry about the projectiles hitting you, you know, as long as they can be blocked. You don't have to worry about a physical attack taking you out. It has some iframes to it, in other words, is a better way of putting it. And it does cost MP, but it also has cooldowns, so you can't spam it over and over and make the game ultra easy. It also has a downside of it's not going to damage armor. So again, this is a lot of stuff that is being put into place, and all the coding I'm doing is being set up template-wise. It's being templated so that when it comes to new attacks, this is quick and simple. You know, I just put in the numbers, change a couple of values, and all the physics are done. The spriting is going to be the hardest part, setting up the animations and getting them sprited and put in. But whatever artist I seek next, and I am currently interviewing people for 2 or 3 spriting positions, I will say this, they're going to have to be able to cut down the number of frames of animation, because something I learned with the previous artist, while his work is amazing here, there were too many frames of animation, which is something I complained about. And while he is very skilled with spriting overall, he didn't understand the concept of keyframing. Keyframing is basically when you take the major frames in an animation, the main ones, like, if I can find a basic example here for those of you who are unfamiliar with what I'm talking about. Let's use this animation. Keyframing wise, you would want to have, let's say, an animation of sprite when he starts, then an active sprite where, say, the sword is all the way out, and then you want to have maybe a final sprite there with the cape at rest, which would be right about here. And then you fill in the rest of the frames once the project director approves the motion. Because just with those 3 frames, if I was to take out the rest of these, I'll show you guys what I mean, bear with me a second here. If I was to take out the rest of these frames, let's take out 1, we don't need that one. And let's take out 2, 3, 4. We need 5. Let's take those out. And now let's take out the rest of these. Oops, that we don't need here. Notice how we still have a choppy but complete animation. This is what you want to do, what you want to look for with an artist, somebody who understands keyframing, because with that I can tell you this motion works, the range on the weapon works. Now smooth out the rest of Alucard's animations and we'll work out the particulars of the weapon itself. At this point it would be doing Alucard's animation and then the weapon next, but you don't need that many sprites. Having that many sprites, as though it looks beautiful, is a lot of work to code them into the game and then match the weapon up and set up hitboxing and anything extra that goes with it. It's not necessary to have an animation that's 10 sprites long for this. It could have been done in 5 or 6. That doesn't sound like a big change, but when you're doing God knows how many animations, it does add up. So that's a big thing looking for an animator. Just a little tidbit I want to throw out there for any of you who might be amateur developers like myself, not to make the mistake I made. If you find artists that are talented but can't keyframe, or everything has to be tons of sprites to make it look smooth, it might be better to pass on that person no matter how talented they are, because it's just going to add so much more to your development time. Alright, so getting back to the weapon, we've talked about what hand 1 would do, button 1, whatever you want to say. What about button 2? Well, button 1 kind of seems like a keep away type of set of moves there. I mean, you can knock an enemy back, you can pop them up in the air, you know. So let's do something different with button 2, which is two-handed chop. And again, this sounds like the special for the basic version of two-handed swords, and it is. Except that it is a normal move here. It's slow but strong, goes through armor, covered all that before. Crouching, again, there's no crouching variant here. It's actually the exact same move. Okay? In the air, it's the same move again, except this time you drop down slamming it onto the ground, and this will take aerial enemies right to the ground with a hit. So, again, very useful if you're dealing with something like a harpy or a cloaked knight floating around to drop his ass to the ground and deal with him. And this right here gives you a very diverse assortment of attacks, because you can pretty much attack any direction you want. You can use this one to cover you if you have projectiles coming at you or an aerial enemy flying in because of the big arc on it. The vertical range above you. You know, I wish I, again, could show you guys the stuff in Unity I'm talking about. It's easier to picture, but we'll have to make do with what we got here. Special move is actually a defensive move, because keep in mind here, well, I'm keeping in mind here, I should say, the fact that the original Symphony of the Night, one of the biggest annoyances with two-handed swords was the lack of defensive options. You couldn't use a shield with them. And this could be a big problem in a game that's fast-paced and difficult. So the special move for this one is actually a parry, where he holds the sword in front of him, blocking the attack. For those who aren't familiar with what I'm talking about, go play Castlevania Curse of Darkness with two-handed swords. And I believe it's weak attack followed by strong attack. He'll do a slash and then thrust the sword directly in front of him. You know what? You guys probably can't picture it, so here, I got a clip for you. And that's all there is to it, right there. That parry in front. Except picture it immediately does this move with no startup. So you can use that to block projectiles. You can still perfect guard the same way as you could a shield with a projectile. But overall, it's being designed that you're going to take more damage doing regular guards. Perfect guards, you take no damage. But if you're just holding the button up to keep the sword in front of you, well, it's going to drain the MP slowly, and you are also going to take more damage than you would blocking versus a shield to offset that. Otherwise, this would be too overpowered. It could also be used to break an enemy's guard. So if an enemy, like let's say a Bone Scimitar's got his shield up, use that to knock him out of his guard and go to town and tear him to pieces. Costs MP, it drains it slowly. Again, this is to balance things out with shields, because shields got to have some kind of advantage over them. But the MP cost is going to be kept pretty nominal. So unless you're, you know, sitting there just holding the button amateurishly the whole time, you'll be able to put it to quite a bit of use, both defensively and offensively, to stumble an enemy and then chop them to pieces. It's also being set up that once you guard against an enemy's attack, you can counter with regular attacks that will come out at a slightly enhanced speed. So now you have a way to go offensively after the enemy with the range of it, the raw power, the ability to have uninterruptible attacks, you know, the ability to take reduced damage during most of those attacks. You have a way to deal with aerial enemies in that you can knock them out of the air into the ground and go after them. You have large, long-range vertical attacks for those enemies that might, like a boss, for example, that might be in the air that you can't take down to the ground because maybe he's tacked to the background wall. Like, if you can't think of a boss, think of Andromelech in Circle of the Moon, I believe it's called. Castlevania Circle of the Moon for the Game Boy Color or Advance. I don't remember at this point. It's been a little bit. You know, he was a background boss tacked into the wall. You obviously can't knock him to the ground. Something like that. And at the same time, you have a way to deflect against enemy attacks, so you have a comprehensive moveset that balances out the weapon and doesn't make it feel like you're lacking anywhere, versus the original two-handed swords that you really did feel like you had a good attack power, but it wasn't worth everything else you were giving up with the ability to have a sword and a shield. And then last but not least is Death Scythe, which is a unique one. I'm not going to touch on this one too much here, but it does have a smaller moveset in that it only does 2 swings. It has the single initial swing, so far we have something that's a combination of the basic two-handed swords and the modern ones I showed above. Its special will be the third attack in the modern two-handed sword standing attack chain, which, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, would be the Death Scythe version of this. As you can see, the effect is out there the whole time, so you're pretty damn defended. It's going to take care of blocking out projectiles while hitting enemies, but so far this seems pretty much like a hybridization of the first 2 sets and very boring. That is, until you look through the notes up here at the extra abilities. One is it leeches an extremely small amount of life per hit, but more importantly, killing enemies will harvest a soul fragment from their death. And that includes hitting mid-bosses and bosses enough you steal one. Because obviously, you know, you're killing an enemy, a skeleton might take 2 or 3 hits, a boss, you're going to need a way to harvest them while they're still alive. So it'll harvest soul fragments that will then allow you to use its second attack button special move, which is summoning lost souls. And that's a move that you basically hold down the button to charge them up, release it, and it fires forward a couple of ghost familiars that will then latch onto the nearest enemy, slowing or stunning them, and explode a second or 2 later. And this is something that I wanted to throw in because I felt having a Death Scythe with no soul-stealing abilities was just fucking lame. I always felt like it was missing something. I mean, it's Death Scythe. There should be something unique to it. It shouldn't just be another, oh, he's a giant weapon, have fun with this. You know, well, no, that's kind of disappointing. It's kind of anticlimactic, in my opinion. On that note, here's an animation from the Death Scythe itself, from its weapon set. So you can see the basic two-handed strike, 2 strikes. You know, again, very similar to the two-handed sword, except this one's slower and only has 2 basic attacks, with the third one being used as a special. And again, that third attack that's used as the special is instantly going to reap a soul. So it's instantly going to reap a soul fragment. So you don't even have to kill the enemy. Okay, if you use this move, it consumes a little MP, but in return, automatically harvests 1 soul fragment, versus having to kill a particular enemy. So you can use this to basically build up your soul fragments. I'm not sure how many soul fragments will make a whole soul, but once you get a whole soul, you can launch one of these ghost familiars out, and I'm setting it up so you can charge up several souls, probably about 5. So you can really blow the shit out of bosses if you're willing to hack away at them with the weapon, doing decent damage, and then really shoot your DPS through the roof by using these souls to destroy the boss or the enemy afterwards. I haven't really talked about hand 2 just yet because there's not too much to say about it. You know, spin Scythe upward diagonally. For those of you who can't picture this, you know, think of Zero's triple rod in Mega Man Zero. You know, where you can spin it in front of him. Crouching, no difference. Air, this one is kind of more of a defensive move to round out this weapon and differentiate it from the other weapon sets. So, I've went on and on about that for about a half hour now. I really didn't mean to talk this long about them, but as you can see, when it comes into conceptual information, there really is a lot to share with you guys. There really is a lot of stuff that I work on in my spare time. I had a lot more I want to show you, but you know, I'm going to hold off on that for now because this video is already going on 30 minutes. As always, I start talking here, and I just get excited and keep going and going. Hopefully I didn't bore you guys to tears. I will touch on one more thing before I go, and that's sub-weapons, because initially I was going to have Summon Spirit, Hellfire, a Flame Pillar attack, the Agnia, Summon Demon, and Pentagram be sub-weapons for Alucard, but upon playing with them a bit, I don't really like you being limited to hearts for every ranged weapon in the game. That was the initial idea, but it's outdated, I feel like. There are plenty of games out there where you have ranged attacks and they balance out just fine with melee attacks, and I really want to put in some ranged stuff. So right now, Alucard actually has his Orbs of Destruction as a weapon set from Castlevania 3. With the current special being Hellfire, but that's most likely going to be changed. It seems like just a placeholder for a moment. I actually feel like having Hellfire itself as a weapon set with Flame Pillar as its special might be interesting, but again, I'll keep playing with that. But that also begs the question, what are we going to do for sub-weapons? Am I going to remove them? Hell no. Hell motherfuck no. What's Castlevania without sub-weapons that consume hearts? It's heresy, it's blasphemy. We won't even talk about Lords of Shadow, which I happen to love the series, but it doesn't feel like Castlevania. But I'm digressing. There are crashes currently in the game, and I always felt like crashes as is are just, they don't get much attention because they're basically panic attacks or burst damage attacks that you can use the hearts for your sub-weapons instead. And well, the bottom line is you're going to get more DPS using individual sub-weapons than you are using a single crash. And I just felt like something that professionals wouldn't really use much because it feels like a waste or it feels like it breaks the game. So instead I'm thinking just tweak what I currently have set for crashes to do less damage and be more usable every so often. Like, for example, Dark Inferno. I could simply set it like the original game where you only shoot 2 orbs instead of the way I have it now that it almost looks like Alucard's version of Thousand Edge, with you able to shoot up to 8 of them over and over but not having much invulnerability. I can simply set it to set 2, still be piercing, have a short cooldown, and we're good to go. Tetra Spirit, on the other hand, could be burst damage that gives Alucard no invulnerability, versus something like Power of Sire that would give you invulnerability, hit everything on the screen, but less damage overall. And of course, cooldown comes into effect here because even though they take hearts to use, there has to be a cooldown period where you can still spam them and blow the shit out of enemies. So there's got to be a balance there that I'm already working with, and I've got to say I'm enjoying it. Soul Steel in particular, I'm happy to do this with because I don't want Soul Steel to be anything like the original game where it steals life. It doesn't heal you at all now. I like the way Castlevania Moonlight Rhapsody actually set up Soul Steel to suck in souls and then release a burst of energy afterwards. I would like to do something like that that has a more risk equals more reward type of setup, in that you first use the move, you have a small window of iframes. If you just want to let it do a burst there with the souls it grabbed immediately upon using it, done, you can do that, but it's not going to be very powerful. Versus if you charge up, well, now you don't have any iframes while it's charging up. You release it when it's charged up enough and you do a lot more damage to your enemies, with, of course, the downside being if you get hit, well, you get knocked out of it, it's going to explode right there with whatever you've charged up so far. So again, risk versus reward here, so that it feels like you're interacting a lot more, not just watching this huge animation. I'm going to have a lot of fun tweaking Richter to work with this setup, but I'm looking forward to it because I think the idea of having a Richter that can actually throw daggers as a base weapon set is going to be interesting, and being able to throw axes as a base weapon set while whipping and not have to worry about hearts. I think that would make for a much faster gameplay. If you look at games like Hollow Knight, or I mentioned Dead Cells earlier in the conversation, or a game like Shovel Knight, these games are fast-paced and manage to balance things out pretty damn good, so I'm going for something like that. At the same time, I've said many times, I get inspired by 3D games such as Devil May Cry, or even the new God of War, even the original God of War, where you have all these different combo options and you can be a bit more technical of what you do to enemies, have more mob control. You know, stuff like that really helps to give me a lot of ideas to approach this from all kinds of angles, because Castlevania can't stay as is. Order of Ecclesia was a slow, clunky game. It's just not as exciting as what indie developers are putting out nowadays. They keep you on the edge of your seat and keep you just pumped up and ready to see what's next. Anyway, so that's it. Now I'm hyped. I'm going to jump off here, get back to doing what I've got to do, as I've got work tomorrow. It was great talking to all of you. Again, I'll reiterate, if you have comments, you hate my ideas, want to tell me to go fuck myself, want to tell me how awesome I am, that I'm the next coming of Jesus Christ, whatever the case may be, you're going to want to leave me a comment, but do it on my Patreon page, because on YouTube, I've said it before, I don't check YouTube comments almost ever. I actually have people that monitor YouTube for me and delete troll comments, and if they see repeat troll comments, just block those people, or people who put up certain things that I say I don't want to see on there, they're just insta-blocked with no warning. So if you're leaving me comments and questions, you're wasting your time. Go join the Patreon, show your support there. I have limited time. Those are the people I'm going to get back to. If you want to talk to like-minded Castlevania fans, feel free to join the Facebook group. That group's gotten pretty damn big at this point. It's got a lot of members. The forums are pretty quiet because there hasn't been a release yet, but if you want to monitor my help wanted ads, I need to start putting up some more, along with some more threads to get feedback on from people. That's a good way to get a lot of ideas for a fan project, is to get community feedback and see what you can implement. All right, that's it. Links will be down below in the video description. I hope you're all doing good. Thank you all so much for the support. Happy New Year. I'll talk to you all soon. Peace.